So now we have Laura Grinder, who's going to be introducing our guest today, our guest speaker, and we're so lucky to have him. I'm sure we'll have lots of questions about this last year and where things are at with the school system. Laura?
Thank you. It really is my honor to do this. I was thinking about why our club is so active when it comes to youth and education. And so if it's all right with you, Dr. Sabbah, I wanted to say a little bit about what's happening with our club. We have a lot of educators, previous educators, that in our professional lives, we worked with students. We also now are like school board members. We have teachers from elementary, middle school, high school, college, university. We have college presidents. We have had members that that helped found the first faculty for Cabrillo College. So the education of our community is near and dear to us. I guess that's my point. And so because of that, we're very active with their Interact clubs and like the high school speech contests and the Rotary Youth Leadership. We've had a couple of people that have been founding members of things like the Kids First programs and Your Future's Our Business. We are very active in scholarships for both 2 high schools, designated community college scholarships, and UC Santa Cruz graduate scholarships. So I would just like to present our club to you as being very passionate about education. And now it's my honor to present you to those folks. Dr. Faris Sabbah is our speaker today, our County Superintendent of Schools. His background is in the K-12 public education system. For the last 25 years, he served as the County Deputy Superintendent, the Assistant Superintendent, a university professor, director and principal of schools, teacher and instructional aide. His bachelor's is in psychology from UC Santa Cruz. His master's is in education leadership from San Jose State. That's where I got mine too. His doctorate is in leadership for education equality from UC Berkeley. He is committed to partnering with the districts and other organizations to create a network of support that propel our students to achieve and thrive. Dr. Sabbah, we're so honored to have you speak to us today.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction and for allowing me to join you today. I'm an active member in our Sunrise Rotary up in the Santa Cruz area, so it's a pleasure to be among friends in the Aptos Capitola or Capitola-Aptos Rotary. Usually when I give a presentation, I talk a lot about kind of giving an overview of the different what our county looks like. Many of you have a lot of experience in education. You're supporting schools now, and so I'm probably going to skip over a lot of the usual stuff to jump right into the pandemic and how it's impacted our schools and our youth, and then open it up for questions, because there's so many moving parts to the current situation that it's unlikely that I'll be able to cover all the things that you would like to talk about. And so I understand we have about 30 minutes for this conversation. And so I'm just going to talk for about 15 minutes, and then we can open up the second half to questions if that works for you. I really appreciate the introduction. I want to tell you a little bit about myself. I was born in Iraq, in the Middle East. I left there when I was 9 years old, when the Iraq-Iran war started, and we came to the United States. And I lived in Oakland with my mom for 2 years before we went to Ecuador, which is where she was from. And my father joined us from Iraq, and I did my middle school and high school years in Ecuador. So most of my upbringing, I was out of the country. I came to UC Santa Cruz to study and stayed here. I've been a resident in Santa Cruz for 31 years now, and love it here, and married with 2 kids. My 2 boys go to school at the Pajaro Valley Unified School District, and I was elected to be your county superintendent a couple years ago. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I wasn't expecting the kinds of things that the transformation that education has gone through in the last year or so. And it's been quite a ride for our students, our parents, our family members, and of course our teachers and support staff. And so, so I'm going to be talking a little bit about what that transformation has looked like and how we've been impacted. Just to give you a general sense of what the whole county looks like, we have about 40,000 students in our public schools. We have about 5,000 students in private schools. Most of the students, half of the students go to the Pajaro Valley Unified School District, about 20,000 of them. The other half are distributed in the rest of the school districts. We have 10 school districts that we work with. And is it okay if I share my screen, Laura? Let me see if I'm able to do that.
Yes, please do.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to skip through some of the slides because, but I'll just share some things with you. So we have about 10 school districts and some charter schools, and you'll see that the majority of the students go to the Pajaro Valley Unified School District. And then we have all of these other school districts, 10 of them in total, that we work with. Some of them very small. Bonnie Doon has 142 students, Happy Valley 113 students. This data is a little outdated, but you get the idea that we have some large school districts and some very small districts. We also have all of these private schools, and part of the process for me this year has been working closely with these private schools because they opened up very quickly during the pandemic, whereas our public schools remained in distance learning. And so we've been partnering together and working together very closely to support them with their efforts and making sure that that their approach is safe and that they're minimizing the risks for their staff and their students. So in terms of the timeline of what happened for us, the transformation that took place, it all started March 13th. That's when we got the order to, or we made the decision, actually, we were the first county in the state to make the decision as a county to to go to distance learning. And everybody else followed after that. But things until then were really kind of a big unknown for us. We weren't sure exactly what was going to happen. We didn't know if we were going to be closed for a few weeks or a few months. And we're 2 days away from the anniversary of that date. And it's been one of the biggest challenges for us was that not knowing. Had we known that we were going to be, our schools were going to be closed for so long, we would have prepared differently. But our understanding, or we were being told, don't worry, just wait another month and things will get better. Things will get better. You know, things are looking good. So we're going to be reopening soon. And so a lot of the communication that went out there was really a lot of mixed messages that we were sending out because that's what we were receiving. We were planning to open up our schools in August. We weren't able to do that. And now finally, we are close to opening our schools. So you'll see from this timeline all the different things that have happened. And I had the pleasure on March 3rd, just a few days ago, to welcome students that are to our first elementary schools that were opening at Vine Hill School and up in Scotts Valley. But if you notice on September 22nd, you'll see that the private schools had already opened. And so even though we waited until March 3rd, the public schools, you'll see that the private schools have been open. Now it's a very different environment for the private schools. They have much smaller numbers. They're able to keep distancing much better and easier because they have 15 students in many cases per class instead of 30. And so their ability to be able to open up fully is much higher for private schools. And whereas with our public schools is very different. And so what our schools are going to look like or are looking like as we open up is very different. So these are kind of the different levels of where we are. When starting in March of last year, we switched to distance learning, which I could tell you, I have two sons, and a ninth grader in Watsonville High School and a fifth grader at Watsonville Charter School of the Arts. And for them, their experience was very different. My ninth grader loves distance learning. He gets his work done. He is getting straight A's. He's thriving. My fifth grader is having a very tough time. He qualifies for special education. He has a disability in reading and processing, and he needs a lot of attention, and distance learning really is left him feeling very isolated. And for a lot of our students, we are experiencing a lot of mental health issues, feelings of isolation, increases in depression, suicidal ideation. We recognize that the distance learning environment has been very, very difficult for a lot of our students and their families. The people's livelihoods have been impacted significantly and they've had to restructure how they run their lives. And so for some students, it's been effective. For many students, it has not been effective. Our failure rate in the high school level is doubled from previous years. Many of our students are no longer on track to graduate. And we believe that we're going to be studying, learning, and addressing the difficulties that our students experience for a long time, because we know that this has been very traumatic in a variety of different levels. Our LGBTQ students have shared, many of them who are not out to their parents at home, they lost their safety net, their support system at schools, their physical support system in schools. And so it's been really a challenge. What we're moving towards right now is a hybrid schedule for our public schools. And this is pretty controversial, and where a lot of our questions from parents come. Why don't we open our schools fully? Well, the California Department of Public Health sets all the parameters that we use that we follow. And in those parameters and in their guidelines, they say that you set up your classrooms with 6-foot distancing from students, between students and their desks. And there's another part in the guidance that says never go below 4 feet distancing. So some people interpret that to say, well, just set up your classroom 4 feet distancing. Others are saying, no, it says set up your classroom 6 foot apart. One of the big challenges in getting us to opening has been the challenge of working with our bargaining unit members, our labor partners. So as you know, private schools can just say, we're changing things around, we're opening tomorrow, and if you don't like it, you can go get another job somewhere else. Whereas the public schools, any changes, those of you that have worked in education know, any change to the conditions of work have to be negotiated. And so two of the things that our labor partners were adamant about was making sure that we adhere to the strict guidelines of the California Department of Public Health and vaccination. And so to get us to the point where we're able to open our hybrid programs, we worked very, very hard to get our education community vaccinated. We were the first county in the Bay Area to vaccinate 100% of our K-12 school staff. And that was done in a matter of 3 weeks. And this was as a result of a partnership with Dignity Health. And now we're also working with Kaiser to get this done. We're continuing with childcare and other education related folks. So we got that done. The second part, of course, is the adherence to the guidelines, and I'll be talking about some specifics of things that we're doing. And as a result of that effort, we were able to secure the agreements to be able to move forward with the opening of our schools. But in hybrid, because there's no way for us to fit 30 students into a classroom and be able to serve them Monday through Friday, because we can't keep them far enough apart and follow the guidelines. And so all of our public schools are opening in this hybrid environment, which means that you can only bring in about half your students at a time. You can't put 30 students. If you separate them, even at 4 foot distancing, you can't fit more than 15 to 18 students in our classrooms, which means that they're going to come in for 2 days, and then another group will come in for 2 days, or maybe they'll come in the morning and another group will come in the afternoon. And that's very frustrating to our community. They want their kids back in school, and they want their kids back in school Monday through Friday like they were before. And that's the full reopening, which is what we want to get to. But one of the things that the CDPH has done is they're not telling us when that's going to be. They're not telling us what criteria is when are they going to take off the distancing requirements that would allow us to bring in our kids, because we fully vaccinated all our staff. There's no vaccines for children yet, but there will be soon. And so we're hoping that we'll get to that soon, and hopefully in the fall we'll be able to fully reopen. But at this point, those distancing requirements are stopping us from being able to do that. And so this conversation about hybrid versus full reopening is one that is so urgent and so much concern to our families. It has a lot of implications for families that are caring for kids at home and for kids' educational experience, because 2 days out of the week is not a lot. And I'll tell you that my child goes to PVUSD, and I got the schedule, and they added 3 hours a week of in-person instruction for my kids. 3 hours, actually for my 9th grader, he gets 0, he's not getting any, but for my 5th grader, he's going to get 3 hours of in-person instruction. And I'm thinking, and they're calling that reopening. And so I'm like, wait, what? That's 3 hours a week. How is that? And I would have to take my son at 12 o'clock and pick him up at 1:30. So that's personal because I'm speaking to you as a parent, but you can imagine that frustration is shared by a lot of people who are experiencing that across the county. And so, so the goal is to get to full reopening, and we've been working really hard on a variety of different mitigation safety measures. And I just want to share with you some of those. We screen students and make sure they don't come to homes to work sick. Everybody's going to be wearing face coverings. Students have to be in stable groups so we don't mix kids around, although you can do some mixing. We've improved the air quality. We've upgraded our HVAC systems and put air purification systems in areas where we weren't able to upgrade the quality of the HVAC to the highest levels. We're doing surveillance testing. Now everybody's going to be tested every other week for COVID, even if you're vaccinated. At the bottom there, we do quarantine and isolation protocols. So if you've been exposed, you have to go home for 10 days. We do physical distancing, 6 feet apart everywhere. We've modified the environment where we put in plexiglass. We clean and disinfect our schools on a daily basis and using special cleaners and special spraying mechanisms. And we've vaccinated 100% of our school community. Well, we've offered it to 100%. Not everybody's accepted. We have about 10%, 5 to 10% of our staff have declined getting vaccinated. So these are all the steps that we've taken to make sure our schools are safe and ready to go. And we feel very confident that those systems are in place. And we are ready. And all our schools are opening up in hybrid. But also another inequity is that some schools like Scotts Valley opened up on March 3rd, but some of the schools in other parts of the district of the county are opening up not till April. And so that's been a bit of a frustration for parents as well. Why is it taking so long to open up our schools? And the other piece that I wanted to share is that a recent package called SB 86 was recently approved by the governor. And that package basically is going to give more funding to schools to encourage them to open elementary schools before April, open secondary schools before May. And if you don't get as much funding. And on top of that, they're giving us additional funding as well. So a lot of the costs that we've incurred to bring in new staffing and additional folks, also to be able to run summer schools and other programs to try to help students who have gotten really far behind in their academics and provide mental health services for our students. There's additional funding that we're getting for all of these steps. I wanted to show you a video of what an elementary school looks like. I don't know if any of you got a chance to be at our town hall meeting, and I might have to stop share and share again because I don't think I shared my sound. But this is a brief video. We filmed this at Main Street Elementary in SoCal, and let's see. Can you hear it?
As schools across the country prepare to reopen for the new school year, we know many of our students and parents have questions. We are here to help inform you on our approach to ensure the safety of all of our students and staff. Each school site will have a dedicated staff waiting to greet and process students before entering campus. When students arrive at the designated drop-off area, they must place their mask on before leaving the car.
To put on your mask, make sure it covers your entire mouth and nose. Your ear strings should be looped around your ears. If your mask has strings that tie together, make sure it's tight enough so that it doesn't fall off.
Before entering the campus, students will meet with staff members at the front of the school to get their temperatures checked. Students who record a high temperature and/or exhibit COVID symptoms will need to return home with their parents. Once students are cleared and able to enter the campus, they will wait to be escorted to their classroom with the rest of the students. Classrooms will maintain desks at 6 feet apart when possible. Teachers will have minimum direct contact with students during class time. Everyone, including instructors and guests, will be required to wear face coverings when in the classroom at all times. When students enter the bathrooms, they'll see some stations blocked off to create space between each student.
After using the restroom, make sure to wash your hands for 20 seconds before going back to class.
Students who receive a school lunch will need to wait in a single file line, distanced from each other, and pick up a grab-and-go lunch box from the non-contact lunch counter. We hope that our students and parents feel confident in the safety precautions that the County Office of Education is taking to keep your child healthy.
All right. And so not all those precautions, this was filmed a few months ago, so things have gotten a little, you won't see the little plastic foam things between kids. Those were for special education students who needed help with the distancing requirement. But you'll see that a lot of the systems that are described in there were some of the things that we went around helping out all the schools develop these protocols, and we did site by site reviews to make sure that they have them in place. So we feel really confident that things are going to be safe for our students, and we're really excited about having them come back to school. We have more openings happening next week. I believe SoCal is opening up, and we're going to continue to support our schools as they move forward with reopening. And that is the information I wanted to share, and I would love to open it up for questions at this time.
I'll have people raise their hand. I have a question. First off, is because Pajaro Valley School District is opening after April, are they foregoing the monies that have been allocated to schools who open before April?
So their spring break goes into the first week of April, and so they don't get penalized for opening the first day after their spring break, but they have to open all of their grade levels. So if they have to open TK through 6th grade by that date. If they don't, every day that they don't open will be 1% less of their funding, and so there is definitely a financial incentive for them to open all grade levels by that date.
Thank you. Art has a question. Unmute. Yeah.
Thanks for your presentation. I'm a pediatrician, so I have had a lot of dealings with non-vaccinators. The situation of a teacher not vaccinating seems to me a very special situation. I'm wondering how you deal with that, the liability issues, and how do you convince one of those persons to not infect everyone else in that classroom or schoolhouse?
Well, I have to say that one of the things I didn't mention was that with all our private schools opening and our small groups that we've had in our public schools, we have had very, very little in-school transmission. So the likelihood of actually getting sick from somebody in the same classroom is actually very small based on our own experience and what research is showing us. And so our commitment to educators is that we are going to offer them the vaccine. And we did have about 10% in the Pajaro Valley specifically that refused or chose not to get vaccinated, about 5 to 8% in the other districts. And so from there is no requirement to get vaccinated from neither here locally or at the state or federal level. It's definitely something we're encouraging. We're trying to have a positive campaign about it. And also we feel like even if we did have a positive case in a situation, we've done it dozens of times where we've had positive cases. Folks quarantine, the person isolates, then they come back after the time. And that's worked really well. We haven't had in-school transmissions, or very few. So very few times has somebody got it from somebody else's school. So all the distancing requirements, all those things really are keeping people protected. And if people choose not to vaccinate, they're still expected to come back to work in person and continue to adhere to all the other policies that we have in place.
I think that doesn't completely answer my question, because I know that young children often don't have symptoms, but they can become super spreaders. Mm-hmm. And I suspect you don't have any way to trace that.
Well, we do contact tracing with all positive cases, and so all the positive cases that have taken place at schools, and there've been dozens of them, we've had virtually none. I think maybe we have 1 or 2 situations where we felt like there was an in-school transmission. So we haven't had any of those super spreader type situations, and we do, and the public health does do contact tracing on all our positive cases, and so. We feel like we'd have good evidence to show that our schools are not places where there's transmission that's taken place at the school site.
I'm sorry, I don't want to monopolize here, but does that mean if a teacher turns positive, all of the students in the classroom and their contacts are contact traced?
It means that all of them will be quarantined.
The students will be quarantined.
All the students will be quarantined, yeah. And we would encourage them to we'd encourage their parents to get them tested if they develop any symptoms.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I see Laura's hand is up. Laura?
Don't make questions, Faris. So yeah, Dr. Art, thank you for following up on that. So so I am assuming there is a policy for closure if a single child in a pod becomes infected, and or a teacher that was with that pod is infected. So you've established a policy for that.
Yes. So anybody who's in a cohort would be considered a close contact, and they would be quarantined. And now the only difference now is that CDC is saying that for teachers who've been vaccinated, if they've been exposed, they do not need to quarantine, and that's a new policy that we're looking at. That we haven't implemented that policy yet, but that's something that we'll be looking to implement once CDPH gives us the go-ahead for schools to do that. But otherwise, generally speaking, what we've done for the last few months is if there's a positive case in a school, anybody in the class is considered a close contact. Everybody has to quarantine, and a person who is a positive case has to isolate, and that's worked effectively for us.
Okay, so I just had a follow-up question then. Gosh, such an experimentation in social engineering and educational engineering. Is there talk about assessing students from where they're at? Is there talk about, and it could be too early, extending the school year or the enrichment programs for students that are identified as not meeting the school standards at the level that they're performing at?
Yeah, absolutely. Extending the school year as a school year is probably not going to happen, just because it would require us to have our teachers be able and willing to do that. And I don't think that's likely to happen, because teachers have had a very exhausting year, just like the students have. But I think that every school district is looking at having those additional enrichment activities, summer school programs, and to try to get as much additional instructional and face time with students to be able to kind of help students recuperate both academically and social emotionally. And so this funding that's coming down is going to be able to pay for that, but it could mean that it won't be their traditional teacher who's teaching it, but we would be hiring new people to be able to help with those programs.
What about the assessment process?
And the assessment process, students have been, they are getting assessed ongoing, and part of the bringing them back is going to include that process. I would say that instructionally, that the teachers have been kind of careful not to over-assess kids, because it's been not very effective in distance. And so I think we're going to be seeing more of that when students come back to school, to be able to kind of determine where students are at. I can tell you that from my own kids and knowing what's happening in Pajaro Valley, that there have been assessments going on. They are doing online assessments. I get updated monthly reports on my child's reading level, but that's because he's in a special ed program, so he's getting extra attention. I think we're going to be doing that with all students as they come back.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Any other questions?
I do.
Okay, Keith has a question.
Number one, my daughter is a school teacher, a kindergarten teacher for 30 years. And her classroom is now divided in half. Half the students come in the morning, half of them come in the afternoon.
Right.
They have eliminated PE. PE is required by the state of California. Do you have, and probably they got a dispensation for not having PE. So are you doing any classroom eliminating any of the classroom subjects like PE?
So most of the requirements are still in place. So my kids are doing distance learning. They still have PEs required, so the education code says you have to do 200 minutes of PE every 10 days, I think. And so there is a program, a part of the class where the students are supposed to be doing PE. They do different activities. So my guess is what they've done for your grandkids, Keith, is they've created some aspects that they're going to be taught in distance in person, and they put other aspects of the learning asynchronously, meaning outside of the in-person environment. And so So knowing how the schedule is structured is going to tell you maybe the PE is not part of the in-person time they're focusing on language arts and math or whatever, and they're going to expect the kids to do their PE time outside, while they're learning not in person. So on the day they have off, or after the 3 hours. And so I think that's where those additional activities are going to be taking place.
Okay, I think, Kate, one last question. Kate? Unmute, Kate.
Okay, there's been so much talk about mental health with these kids, especially at the high school level. Will there be any arrangements for that, like more counselors or special programs? Is that going to get some attention? Because I know from personal experience, some of these kids don't want to come back to school.
Mm-hmm.
They
I
like
agree,
to stay home.
Right, and some of them are having to work to help pay bills, and I mean it's been really tough on them in many ways. And so we've also had an increase in incidents of reports of abuse at home and other really difficult situations for our youth. And so I think trauma is something we know exists, and we're trying to support that. So yes, so the school districts have been hiring additional staff. We actually are contracting with Encompass Services, for example, to add additional services for youth that are having a tough time. I believe, honestly, that this time that we're going to be working with students the next few weeks is going to be a bigger focus on mental health and academics. And because our feeling is that if students have not been able to get the social emotional support, that they're going to be, the academic pieces are we're not going to be able to help them academically if they're struggling with mental health. And so this funding that is coming down that we're receiving is definitely going to be used to hire additional mental health services. We're increasing the amount of counselors and therapists that are available to students. And I could tell you too that what happened during distance learning is that a lot of the therapist appointments were done online and kids didn't show up. They were not comfortable with this online environment to talk to somebody, which is understandable. And so we have a lot of work to do to reconnect, rebuild the trust, and then provide those therapeutic services to our students.
Thank you, and I'm glad you're doing that.
Okay.
Thank you, Kate.
I think we still have 2 more questions. Can you hang on and answer the questions, or are you?
Oh yes, I'm not in a rush. I'm good.
Okay, so Sandy, you go, and then Craig.
So mine isn't a question, it's just a comment. I want to thank you for the collaboration you have promoted among your 10 superintendents. I know you meet at least weekly, I think, or
Twice a week.
Twice a week, okay. And it is so good for our teachers, our districts, our kids, our support staff, everybody, to have everybody in our county on the same page. So thank you so much for doing that.
Thank you, Sandra. It's been great. And I have to say, working with the other superintendents has been absolutely amazing. They're an amazing group. And we also meet weekly with all our charter schools and weekly with all our private schools. And so that collaboration is now, and weekly with all our childcare providers. So we have all of these relationships, and we're building on that, and it brings clarity and better communication, and we also hear from them about all the things that need to be resolved. So thanks for sharing that, Sandra.
So Craig, you have a question, and then we'll end the meeting.
Okay, well, this is a question that may be too early to ask, but I'm going to ask it anyway. There was a $1.9 trillion bill that was passed by Congress.
Mm-hmm.
Would you happen to know if any of that money is earmarked in some way for our county?
Yeah, so that money is going to go to all the schools based on their Title I allocations. And your Title I allocation is based on how many free and reduced lunch students you have, with a few exceptions. There's a few caveats. So Pacific Elementary and Mountain Elementary don't get any Title I money, mainly because of the way the census works, which is a long conversation. So they're not going to get any of that money. And 90%, I should say, of that $1.9 trillion, the 90% of the part that goes to the school is going to go directly to the schools. I think that Pajaro Valley is probably going to be getting about $30 million as a result of that money. And then, all the smaller school districts, you could kind of get a sense based on their population size, how much it is. So it's a lot of money, and it's one-time money. So hiring a bunch of people only goes so far, but definitely setting up programs like summer schools and hiring therapists and all those kinds of things that we need to do. We will be able to do a lot of good with this funding that's going to be coming down.
Good.
Thank you so much for joining our group today. It was wonderful to have you. Yeah, lots of
pleasure.
good
My pleasure.
information. I know it's been a hard job this last year. Yeah.
It's been great, but it's getting to know people and getting connected out there has been absolutely wonderful. And thank you for Rotary is such an outstanding organization. It's wonderful to see. It's great to see Julie over here. Hi, Julie. And really a pleasure to be here with our fellow Rotarians. So a pleasure to be here. I'm happy to come back anytime. If you'd like an update in a couple of months, I'd be happy to do that as well.
Thank you so much. Okay.
Thanks so much for the invitation.
Bye, everybody.